Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. We are going to be talking about an epic champion today that I think has been kind of all but forgotten in today's meta. And as you've seen in the thumbnail, that is going to be Gory from the Shadowkin faction. So this guy had a decent amount of hype surrounding him when the game initially announced that they were going to be bringing in Fire Knight Hard. Because people looked at Fire Knight Hard and they're like, hey, we need freeze. This guy has a multi-hitting freeze ability on his kit. He's probably going to be pretty good. That being said, obviously over the months since that content has been released, I think it's probably years now at this point, we've had a lot of epic champions as well as, you know, even some rare champions that can do the role pretty much just as well as him. But as you can see, he still has pretty decent reviews across the board, so I wanted to essentially just do kind of a showcase on him and talk about what he's actually capable of. So he has an A1 Cold Comfort, attacks one enemy 2 times, placing an extra hit, so a 3 times hitter if they're under a freeze. Heals this champion by 10% of the damage inflicted. This is an attack-based champion, of course. His A2, which is the skill that we're talking about, attacks 3 times at random, each hit having a 100% chance of placing a freeze. This is pretty cool because essentially this means that you're going to be bumping in 3 freezes into the Fire Knight. Because when you have an attack 3 times at random, it's guaranteed that it's all going into the single target if there's only one target that can actually go to. And then finally, on his A3, we have attacks one enemy, will ignore increased defense and shield buffs, will also ignore 50% of the target's defense if they're under a freeze, places a counterattack and an increased attack buff on this champion for 2 turns if this attack kills an enemy. So this is on a 3-turn cooldown when it books. He's not really, you know, one of those champions that you're going to build for a whole ton of damage or anything like that, so I'm not really going to talk about his damage multipliers or anything of that nature. That being said, though, I will go ahead and I will find him inside my champion index here, and we'll go ahead and take a look at how I have him built. Now, I say this all the time, but this is very suboptimal gear. There's lots of 5-star pieces on here. I built him out essentially when I had significantly less champions and less gear on my account, so you can certainly get a better build on him if you have, you know, better gear to put on him, essentially. Shocker, right? So these are the stats that we're rocking. For Fire Knight Hard specifically, this is how he's going to be looking. So 432 on the accuracy, plenty of accuracy there. 240 on the speed, 4200 on the attack, and then 105% crit damage and 40% crit rate. I didn't worry about building him for damage whatsoever. He's essentially just there to be a control champion, right? So let's go ahead. Let's hop into the campaign real quick and just show you essentially what his animations are going to look like, because some of them are pretty cool. So we're probably not going to win the fight, obviously, but let's just go ahead and see how he looks in the actual battle. So we have his A1 here, which he kind of just goes in, does a quick double slash on the enemy, gets out of there. Pretty cool stuff. We have his A3 here, Frostbreaker. So he's going to go ahead and smack, and he is actually taking them out, even though he's not built for damage, right? So definitely not too bad. He could potentially be the campaign farmer that you need, I guess. And then we have the Frost Jutsu, A2, goes in, just takes them down with a triple hitter. We're going to go ahead and throw this on auto and see him do his thing. Now, for PvE, or City of Centranos content, those sorts of things, obviously having the increased attack as well as the... I did not expect him to do this, by the way. This is only brutal, so it's nothing too crazy, but he's doing it a lot easier than I thought he would, certainly. But yeah, like I was saying, having the self counterattack as well as the self increased attack can be very strong. As you see, he's going to essentially just be putting out so much CC as well as extra hits and those sorts of things that he can really do some work, obviously. And then not only that, but he could also be a perfect Hydra tank, essentially, to prevent your buffs being stolen, because he's going to bring the counterattack, and if nobody else on your team is bringing counterattack, that's automatically a buff that he has that nobody else does. So let's go ahead and take a look at how he's built. I do have him built out inside Phantom Touch. I highly recommend Phantom Touch for Fire Knight, especially Fire Knight Hard, if you're not sure if you're going to be able to take down the shields or if there's any question about it. We don't have any relics on him, and then for masteries, we do come down here over to War Master because we essentially just want him to have a chance to do extra damage. He's built out inside a speed and accuracy set, and again, these stats are incredibly suboptimal, right? So you can see we have HP on both of our accuracy pieces here, and that was strictly just to keep him alive, because when I was using him inside Fire Knight, essentially there was a very good chance that he was going to get smacked and die. So this is the team that we're going to be testing out here. Now, he is not alone for freezing. I don't think he's going to be able to do that particular role on his own. There are fantastic options you can bring. So obviously a front runner is going to be somebody like Neldor. You can also bring in somebody like Yakarl the Scourge, can do it very well. We had Blizzard, who was doing it for quite some time as well. So this guy here, he has a triple hit A3 on hit, or sorry, rather freeze on his A1, which is pretty cool, along with self-revive. Obviously, if you have a Newt, it's going to kind of trivialize this particular fight. So there's a lot of options that you can bring in. If we go to filter and then debuffs, and then just filter by freeze, you can see that there's quite a few champions inside the game that can do it. Durandil is another fantastic call out. Actually, he doesn't get enough love, I don't think. I was using him for a period of time because I didn't have Creodin the Blue, who is another fantastic option for this, right? So a 3-hitter with a chance of freeze on the A1, AoE on the A2 that has a freeze there as well. Let's go ahead. Let's talk about the presets here, because this is important. How's this going to work? First of all, one thing to make note of, Lady Mikage opens with her Metamorph into her second form, and then Metamorph is disabled on her second form until we get to round 3, at which case it's the opener. Then she opens with the ally attack, then her Metamorph is disabled. Her Silken Snare is also going to be disabled because there's not really any buffs that I'm worried about extending, but I do want her to be doing Shadow Lash as much as possible, because Gory and Zinogre both can be pulled in when she does that, essentially. Another important thing is for your Farrakhan, just make sure his A2 is turned off for the boss. I've talked about this many times. If you have the boss's debuff bar filled up with poisons and burns, you're not going to be able to place freezes on him, which means that you can't reduce his turn meter and it's run over. If you don't have Lady Mikage, that's perfectly fine. She's just an ally attacker with some control. Bring in a Cardiel, bring in a Farrakhan, bring in anybody else like a Lady Atessa even, worst case scenario. Morag, I think, is another ally attack champion. Basically, just somebody that can help your team get more hits on the boss, and somebody that can potentially do a little bit of control on the waves as well. You'll see that Lady Mikage does a fantastic job of keeping this under control. We are just doing stage 2 on Fire Knight hard because, again, I don't have Gory built for the higher stages. This is where I was using him when I originally built him, and he does work very well here, so I wanted to kind of showcase him in this position. And realistically, if you have better gear that you can throw on him, by all means do it, and you'll probably be able to, you know, fight the higher stages, essentially. One important thing I wanted to talk about, too, while we're essentially progressing through this slowly here. He is extremely good if you're running him inside any sort of refresh accessories. So those are the accessories that per accessory has a 5% chance, I think, of decreasing a skill's cooldown, or stopping the skill's cooldown, essentially. He's also incredibly good in, I think it's Impulse set that you get from Live Arena. The 2 pieces with a 12% chance to reduce the skill cooldown. And then obviously also Reflex and Merciless on top of that as well. So any sort of a set that's going to be decreasing skill cooldowns, preventing skill cooldowns, or if you run him with a champion, obviously, that has some sort of a reset skill. So like a Crixia, Renegade, Yumiko, Kaimar, you know, if you just happen to have some of the best champions in the game, feel free to run Gory with them, and they'll certainly help to empower them. And the reason for that, essentially, is his freeze is coming, obviously, from his A2, which can be on cooldown, right? Whereas somebody like a Neldor, he's placing freezes on the A1. Newt is getting freezes on the A1. Creodin freezes on the A1. You kind of get the theme, right? Yakarl has freezes on the A1. There's a lot of champions that are doing the freezes, Blizzard as well. So for Fire Knight, you either need good cooldowns, lots of speed, or you need some sort of, you know, cooldown reduction, essentially. So that's one thing to keep in mind if you're having a bit of issues running this particular team. Another thing to mention is, so Zinogre has a speed in dungeons by 30%, so he's getting almost another 30 speed. It's going to be like 26 speed or something like that for him inside this run. So he's going to be closer to and pushing the 300 speed as opposed to the 240 that I showed. That being said, he doesn't necessarily have to be that fast for Stage 2, obviously. You can go onto the Hell Hades website and take a look at their Stages tool, essentially, and it's going to walk you through, you know, all the stats that you need there in terms of, like, accuracies and stuff like that. So certainly feel free to go check it out, essentially. But he is a very, very, very cool champion, that's for sure. I do actually have another one of him built out with a bit of a blessing on him as well. So I'm thinking at some point that I'm probably going to try the 2 of them for maybe like Fire Knight 10 and see if I can do some sort of like a cheese strategy there to actually progress through it. The downside to this particular team composition, as you can see, is that, well, you know, we don't have a whole lot of damage. So this is very similar to the team that I run. If you've seen my videos, you'll know this, but for, you know, Fire Knight 10, essentially, we would just replace Gory with Newt, and that's the exact same team that I run. So you can see we come into the Fire Knight. Mikage switches over to her first form and then gets the ally attack in there. Everybody just comes in and does, you know, absolutely shreds them here. I do have Neldor set up to do his A3 off the start, so we can try for the decreased speed. He doesn't do it, though. He must have done it on the previous wave. I don't think I set that up properly, but we should be able to keep the shield down here, essentially. We're going to have, of course, Lady Mikage coming in and basically just bringing the ally attacks from Zinogre. We have the Frost Jutsus coming in from Gory quite frequently there. The Phantom Touch on him is helping us get some additional damage as well. Neldor is incredibly strong because obviously he has his freeze on the A1. But even more importantly, anytime somebody places a freeze on your team, so anytime that, you know, say for example Gory places a freeze, Neldor's passive means that he's going to have a chance of ally attacking with him. So again, you know, trying to place more of a freeze essentially. You can see the turn meter bar is basically not leaving the bottom here, which is pretty cool. And you can see Gory's actually doing some very decent damage as well with a combination of our fantastic damage dealing stats that we have on him, along with the Phantom Touch there. Phantom Touch is just so damn good because even if you don't build your champions for, you know, high crit rate or crit damage or those sorts of things, it's going to do damage based off of their attack. So in the case like Gory, where he has 4,200 or something like that attack, it's still going to do very decent damage, obviously, with that. Same thing with Neldor, right? Neldor's built out incredibly fast. He's not really built for damage. As you can see here, though, very solid damage coming out of Gory. So if I move, you can see that the damage from Zinogre is 1.9 million. And then we have Neldor at 1.2, but then we have Gory at a solid 1 million as well, which is pretty cool. It's certainly pretty cool for such a champion that's not really talked about these days. Obviously, he's very, very useful for something like Faction Wars as well. And then there are some, you know, niche stages inside City of Centranos where you could bring him and get some use out of him as well. So I hope this little showcase was enough to remind some people that you might have Gory sitting on your account just chilling there. I'd love to hear if you guys have him built. I'd also love to hear your thoughts on the Deck of Fate event here for the Knave of Hearts. I am kind of tempted to go for it. I don't know if I'll have the energy to do it, but you know, there is some rewards in here that you can get. It's basically just an advanced dungeon divers, essentially, where you can get some of these extra goodies, which seems okay. Not a fan of this fusion, though. This fusion has been incredibly toxic. I'm just getting as many of the fragments as I can, essentially. I don't think I'm going to be able to finish the fusion, but essentially I'm just okay trading these fragments in for obviously High Mother mod fragments at the end of the day, so we're just going to get as many as we can, kind of go from there. That being said, though, thank you guys all so much for the support on the channel, and I'll see you next time.